This is a continuation of my series for a project management app in Power Apps. And in this video, I'll show you how we can build a grid view experience for our users that's going to complement the board view that we already have. It'll allow them to sort their data based on ascending or descending order of various columns, and it'll allow them to mark things as completed just using a check mark directly on the grid. And a little bonus at the end of the video, I'll show you how you can create a nice preview of the people assigned to a particular task. So if there's more than one, you'll be able to see their picture, and if they don't have a picture, then you'll see their initial. So stick around to check that out, but let's just dive right in. So we've created our gallery here in the previous videos, but let's say we want to create a grid view. So we want to have each task on one line, on one row, and just going horizontally this way. First thing we want to do is create the ability to select between the board view, which is this, and the grid view that we're going to create. So I'm thinking we'll put it just under here, under the tasks, and we'll have the ability to select both. And the default selection will be this board view, and the users can have an option to select the grid view if they wanted to, which will unlock some additional functionality like sorting and things like that. So let's go ahead and do that. So under this container here, we're going to go ahead and insert a gallery, blank horizontal gallery. We'll make the height. So we're going to turn off flexible height and we'll make it 40. And minimum width, we're going to set to 0. We're going to keep it at stretch. The border, I'll set it to none. It's already at 0, but that's fine. Template size, we're going to change to 90. Of course, you can play around with this, but I think based on the font and the size of the text that I'm going to be using, 90 should be sufficient. Template padding, I'm going to set to 0. And I'm going to show scroll bar no. In the items, the data source property, the items property, we're going to set it to a table. Now you can either write table like this with a bracket and then squiggly brackets and set up your records, or you can just declare a table using a square bracket and then the curly braces. So I'll just do that. And I'm going to set this first record as an ID, let's say 1. We may or may not need the ID. I'm probably just going to go with the title name because we're also going to have a title. And let's call this board. So that's going to be the board view. And we're going to also create a new record, and that's going to be ID 2. And the title will be grid view. Close the curly braces and close the square bracket. So that's going to create a table with these two options. And now we can go ahead and plug them in essentially. So I like the filter button that we had created. You can see it has a hover option here, and it's we already designed it. I'm thinking of going to continue in that same way. So I'm going to copy this, and within this gallery, I'm going to hit this edit button, and I'm going to paste that button in there. I'm going to make sure that the width and height is that of its parent template width and template height. So parent.template width, and height will be parent.template height. And then the text, I'm actually going to say this item.title. So this is going to have board and grid on it. If we use the Option or Alt key, we can preview what it looks like. And then when you hover, it does have that change of color effect. And so I'm going to select this gallery and I'm going to move it. We can do reorder, move up. I'm just going to move it up so that it sits above our gallery, but also below our tasks title, and the filter will stay here as well. So I think that's pretty good. On select, I definitely want to make sure I don't have this. So we're going to actually set a new variable, and let's call this set var view. And we're going to set to this item dot title. You could use ID. Title I'm going to use because it'll be more easy for me to reference what the title is. So that's good. And one other thing I do want to play around with is the selected color. So if board is selected, I want it to permanently remain this purple color. If grid is selected, then I want it permanently to select that same color. So what I'm going to do is have to update its color property. So right now it's just gray by default, but what I want is to set a condition. So if var view equals this item dot title, Then I want my theme dot primary. Otherwise, I want my theme dot light gray, or actually gray, just gray. Light gray is too light. So right now I haven't actually selected it, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on it, and you can see it stays on board. If I click grid, it'll remain on grid. And we also want to set this functionality at the start of our app, so the default one will be board. So what we can do, go to our app, and on start, we're gonna set our variable var view to board. And so right now, nothing's selected. If we right click on app and run on start, you'll notice that the board automatically gets highlighted as the default. And then the users can toggle between each of them as they start to use the app. And so when board is selected, I want this whole section here, this whole gallery, I want it to be visible. So I'm gonna update this visible property right here, and we're gonna say var view equals board. So as long as that's true, it's gonna be visible. If the user selects grid, it's gonna be hidden. And this is where we'll insert our other gallery where we can play around with the grid view and do all of our settings. So now that we're in our grid view and this container selected, we're gonna go ahead and insert a new gallery. And it's going to be a blank vertical gallery. And for the items, I'm gonna look up the other board view. So I'm gonna go back to board, and I'm going to take a look at this gallery's code, and I'm gonna reuse this. I'm just gonna take this, click on the grid so we can hide it, and I'm gonna select that gallery and paste it in here. Although it's gonna give us an error because it's not a nested gallery. There's no gallery within a gallery. So I'm gonna delete this filter here because that's not relevant in this scenario, but it will keep all the rest of them. And some quick settings that we can update for the gallery itself. I'm gonna keep flexible height on, but I'm gonna do minimum height of 0. The width I am also going to keep to stretch, but the minimum width I'm going to set it to 1100. And you'll see why that's important a little bit later, but we're going to allow when the screen shrinks down to mobile size, because it will be responsive. I want the users to be able to scroll to the right and to be able to see all of the data that still exists. So it's not going to be super shrunk where you can't even tell what's on each column. So that's going to be fine. And I'm also going to set the template size. I'm going to replace all this with just 50, and template padding I'm going to remove, and that should be good for now. So now I want to actually go ahead and design each row of our gallery. So I'm going to hit this edit button, and I'm going to insert a container, regular container. I'll set its X and Y to 0. Width I'm going to set to parent.template width, and height will be parent.template height. I'm going to turn off border radius. I'm going to remove the drop shadow. And so the next thing we're going to do, the reason I'm setting this main container first is because I'm going to have an invisible button that hovers over top of all of our labels that we're going to put. So that's going to allow us to put it over top of everything. But before we do that, within this container, let's insert another container, and it's going to be a horizontal one. And this is what's going to contain each of our columns. So title, status, project, all of these things that we care about are all going to go within this container. So I'm going to go ahead and set some of its properties here. We want to make sure the X and Y are 0. Width, I'm going to say parent.width, and height will be parent.height. Border radius 0, drop shadow none. I really wish these came as 0 and none by default, but I keep having to change them back and forth, but that's okay. And one thing actually that I forgot to do in this gallery, I want the background color to be my theme dot light gray. So first let's go ahead and insert a text label. And these will all be text labels pretty much, but this one will be, instead of text, will be this item dot title. So that's going to be the title of each of our tasks. I'm going to change the font to Lato. Font size I'm going to change to 12. To give it some space, I'm going to increase the left padding to 10. I'm going to set the height to stretch with a minimum height of 0. And I'm going to turn on flexible width. So right now at first it's going to take up the whole space, but eventually it'll take up less. With the minimum width, I'm going to set it to 200 because as the app becomes into a smaller size, I don't want it to go so narrow that you can't even see what the text is. 200 is a decent amount of space to give it as a minimum. And this is where some of the design is going to start to come in. The background I'm going to set to white, but the border I'm going to set to solid, and I'm going to increase that to 4. With the border color, which is up here, border color, I'm going to set this to my theme.light gray. So that looks good to me. The next thing we can start to do is maybe we can do the dates. So we're going to do a start and end date. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in maybe 2 more times. Yeah, there you go. So one will be the start date, one will be the end date. So I'm going to change this start date and due date. Now when it's showing the full month name, it's going to take up a lot of space. I do want to be efficient, so I'm going to change this to a text and I'm going to format it using y-mm-dd. Ooh, no 0. There you go. And I'm going to do the same for the due date. I'm going to do text and then in that format. So that's the start date, that's the due date. The only difference here is the minimum width. I can tolerate a smaller width instead of 200. Maybe we can do 120 for each of them. So that should be good right there. Now I want to do the project and the status and priority as well. So I'm going to just actually paste the title a couple more times here. So the project is a related list, right? So it's not in our tasks list, which is the data source that we're using here. It's actually a lookup to a different SharePoint list. So instead of this item.title, we're going to have to do a lookup, and it's going to be the projects list, and the ID has to equal this item.project ID. And once that matches, I just want to extract the title of that project. So there it pops up in here. And sometimes it can be good with the wrap and it sort of goes on a new line if it's too long. But just for simplicity, I do want to turn off wrap for all of them actually. So just in case if it does get into a small screen situation, I don't want it to go into the new lines. So I'm going to turn off the wrap for all of those. And that should be good. Now the enhancing customer engagement, process efficiency, these are all the projects that are related to these tasks. So that's perfect. Everything is working as it should. The next one I want to do is status. So instead of the text being title, I'm going to do status.value. And the other one here is going to be status, or not status, but it's going to be priority.value. And these ones, the status and priority, I want them to have smaller minimum widths. So I'm going to make it the same as what I did for the dates. So it's going to be 120 and then 120. And another thing I want to do, the title, I don't want it to be equally distributed with the date and the status and all of those. So I actually want to increase the fill portions to 2. So it's going to take up 2 spots, and I'm going to do the same for the project. So it's going to be 2. So it's going to take up a bit more space, and that's going to look a lot better when we're viewing the data either in a larger screen or on a phone or tablet. Now we could add some conditional formatting to the status and even the priority. So for the color, we can do something custom here. We could do a switch function, and we're going to switch through this item.status.value. And for every occurrence that it matches, so when it's gonna be in, or when it's to do, that's the first one on our list, I think, to do, it's going to be color.blue. If it's in progress, it's going to be color.purple. And if it's ready for QA, it's going to be color.orange. And if it's completed, it's going to be color.green. Otherwise, transparent. So you can see now it all automatically updates the colors. So that's a good visual effect. And we can do something similar for the status of priority. So I'm going to go to its color and we're going to do switch again. And it's going to be this item dot priority dot value. And if it's low, then I want color dot maybe blue. If it's medium, I want color dot orange. And if it's high, then I want color dot orange red. And we can see that's pretty good. Actually, the color doesn't really match there. Oh, it's the spelling. High, there you go. And there you go. So now we have low, medium, and high. So you can play around with the colors. You can also add them to the app and the formulas bar where we have our colors. You can define them here as well to be very specific. But for this, I'll just do this for now. That's totally fine. So this is great. It's working well. What I want to do also is add titles that are going to align to each of these pieces. So what I can do is once I have this container here selected, I want to insert another container, and it's going to be a horizontal container, and we'll set this minimum width to 0. The flexible height I'll turn off, and I'll set that to 50 to match the height of each of these rows. And I'm going to turn off border radius, turn off drop shadow, and I'm going to then copy each of these text fields. And I'll just copy that, select that container again, and just paste them in. Of course, we don't have any data, so I'm just going to go ahead and edit these formulas. The text, this will be title. I'll have to set them manually. So it's going to be title. This is going to be start. This one will be due. This one is going to be project. This one will be status. It also has a color property, so I'm just going to have this to be black. And this one is for priority. And the color property as well. We can't use this custom function, so I'm just going to say black as well. So that's great. They're going to have the same distribution. So as the screen shrinks, it's going to shrink with it. But you'll see it's not perfectly aligned here. So let's go back and see what's going on. So one thing here, we need to also match the width, the minimum width. So the minimum width, remember we said it was 1100 for the other one. So this one we can also move up. So I'm going to reorder, move up so that it aligns on top. And if we hit play, you'll see that it's all aligned together, but we're not able to scroll horizontally. And that's because we need to enable a container that allows a horizontal scroll when it's overflowing. And I need to actually insert another container to house both my title sections and my data. So I'm going to go select this container right here that's just outside of the navigation menu. And here I'm going to insert another container, and it will be a vertical container. And this one, I'm going to set the minimum width to 0. Still keep it at stretch. The flexible height I'll leave as on with a minimum height of 0. I'll turn off border radius, and drop shadow will be none. But the key thing is that's going to enable us to do a horizontal scroll is this one here, the horizontal overflow. So I'm going to change that to scroll, and you'll see in a moment how that's going to work. So I also want to go and select my gallery and also the title container. So this here, so both of these, I'm just going to go ahead and Command or Control X. I'm going to select this new container and I'm going to paste both of those in directly in there. And so now when we hit the play button, you'll see we now have a scroll bar and it works perfectly as is. And what I can do, so this is just, personal choice, just for as far as styling. I'm gonna set that new container that houses both our titles and our data. And I'm gonna change the fill color, and I'm gonna do my theme dot light gray. And that means all of the titles here that we set a white property for a fill, I'm just gonna set that to transparent. And it's all gonna align with all of our border colors and everything else. So that'll be a nice little design. And for these titles, I also wanna make them bold. So instead of Lato, maybe we can do a Lato black. So that's looking pretty nice. And a key thing here, so that whole container, we're gonna select it and I'm gonna update its visible property. So visible, I'm gonna set it to var view equals grid. So if it equals grid, and remember that's set with these buttons here. So I'm gonna click through board and click through grid. You'll be able to see you can switch between each of them. So that's looking pretty good. If we want to add some additional functionality, I definitely want to put a button that's going to overlay over each of them so we can actually select something and go to our form and things like that. But before we do that, I do want to insert a checkbox. So I want there to be a checkbox next to each of these. And if we select it, it's going to automatically set the task to completed status. And if we unselect it, it's going to go back into the to-do status automatically, so without actually going into the item. So we would use a bit of a patch function for that. And so I'm going to select this container that houses all of our text inputs, and I'm going to insert a checkbox. It's by default, it's going to go all the way to the right. I'm going to move it all the way to the left, and I'm going to turn off or delete the text. Its default value I'm gonna set to a custom option here, and it's gonna depend on whether this task is completed or not. So if this item dot status dot value equals completed, that would be true, and it's gonna be true, so it's gonna check that box. But if it's false, if it's any other status, it's gonna be empty. Of course, I don't want it to be this wide, so I'm just going to change the height. Height is fine. Maybe I'll just set it to parent.height. And the width, I'm going to set to not a flexible width. It's going to be, let's say, 50. So that looks pretty good. And I'm going to adjust some of the padding. So you can see it's not very centered. So I'm going to do a left padding of, let's see, 10. That might be too much. Maybe 5. Yeah, that works. And padding bottom, I'm going to bring it up a touch, maybe 3. That looks pretty centered to me. So that's good. I also want to play around with some of the chevron and the border and things like that. So let's see some of the options that we have. We have checkmark fill. Right now it's this color. Let's see if I delete it. It's going to be, I guess, just black. Maybe we can do a green. So we can do color dot green. So that's pretty good. The checkbox background fill, right now it's white. I'm gonna maybe make it transparent. So that's good. And the border as well of the checkbox. So checkbox border color, I'm gonna set it to transparent. So that looks pretty good. We don't have any box, so we'll know that if they select it, they can mark it as completed. Or maybe we want it as my theme dot gray. So it's going to be a darker gray. That looks pretty good, actually. We're going to set the border. So border will be solid, a 4. the border color will be my theme dot light gray. And I'm going to set the fill of the whole thing. I'm going to set it to white. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And we can actually take that chevron border color and let's maybe make it transparent. That kind of looks better to me. Yeah, because now we have the border of the overall chevron, so that's looking pretty good. Now we also need to set some properties on when we select it, what's it actually going to do. So it's on select property or on check property, and we can go to advanced and pick the on check property. I want it to do a patch. So we're gonna do a patch of tasks. So in our tasks table, we're gonna do a lookup for the current task, which is tasks where ID equals this item dot ID. And I want, once it matches to that record, I want the status to be a value, and that value will be completed. And close off the curly braces for the record, and then finally the final bracket. And I'm going to copy this, and because I want to do something similar on uncheck. So on uncheck, I'm just going to paste that in, and we're going to change the status to do. So that's going to be the actual functionality of this. So if we preview our app, and maybe I'll just set it to a tablet here so it's easier to see. If we select the check mark, it will see the to do, the status automatically becomes completed. If we uncheck it, it goes back to do. So there you go. So that's going to be a nice little functionality. One more thing that we can do is if the task is completed, maybe we can change this font to be crossed out. So I believe it's the strike through property. Yeah, it's called strike through. It's by default, it's false, but I'm going to set it to this item dot status dot value equals completed. If it is, it's going to have a strike through. So that's looking pretty good. Now adding this checkbox, which is 50 pixels in width, it now makes my top bar, the title bar, to be unaligned. So what I'm gonna do is on our container here that houses all of our titles, I'm gonna do a left padding of 50. So that's gonna always sort of have a space for this checkbox to live, and it'll be perfectly aligned with all of our other columns. So if we go ahead preview, there you go. If we change it, we can scroll. Everything's looking great. Now we want to actually be able to select these records, right? So we don't want to just have a check yes or no. I want to be able to click on this and go to the form view where I can make actual changes, edits, updates, all that other good stuff. So we've done these invisible buttons in the past, so I'm gonna go ahead and copy one of those. So I'll go back to the board view and I'll just copy this. So this this button here, it gives us some of that hover animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy. I'm gonna go back to our grid, select our container, and it's gonna be the overall container that houses everything. I'm gonna go ahead and paste in there. And you can see that button is over here, but we're going to need to make some adjustments. So its X property is always going to start at 50 because that's where that checkbox ends, because I want both of them to be able to select it, right? If you select the checkbox, it marks it as completed. If you click anywhere else, I want you to go to the to set the var task as this item and navigate to the task form. And the width I'm going to set to parent.width minus self.x. So where it's starting, which is at the 50 mark, I want it to stretch out all the way to the very end. So now you can see we have a functioning table. If we click on one of these, it's going to take us to our task form, and we can make changes and do all of those things. So there you go. And you can also have separate functionality with this checkbox. And you can see our filters, they still work with this. So let's see if we want to see all the medium priority, we can see all of that. It all works perfectly well. If we want to see a particular project, there we go. Now all these tasks, this is maybe a bit of a bonus tip here, but if we click on one of these, there's assign to. There's the assign to column, which can have multiple people be selected as part of a particular task. I want to be able to display their profile pictures or their initials as little circles here up to a certain point, maybe two of them. And if it's any more than that, we can do like a +1 or +2 or whatever it is as a little icon here. So that's going to create a nice visual effect for us of who's assigned to this particular task. So what we can do is maybe create another container, and I'll show you how we can get this done. I'm going to select this container here that has all of our sort of a checkbox and all of our labels. I'm going to insert another container, and it's going to be a regular just overall container. And I'm going to set the minimum height to 0, and the minimum width will be 125. So that's going to just give us a bit more space to work with if it's not big enough. And the border radius I'm going to set to 0, drop shadow will be none. And I'm also going to set the fill color to white. And I'm going to set its border, so keep it at solid. We're going to make it a 4. And I'm going to set the border color to my theme dot light gray. So it's going to match the rest of the table. And I'm going to take one of these, this priority here. I'm going to copy and just paste it. And I'm going to set this to assigned to. And I'm going to also match it up to the minimum width of 125. So before we get started, we do need to make sure that we are connected to Office 365 users as a data source. This is going to allow us to check whether users have a photo or they don't. And if they don't, we'll get their initials. And if they do, then we'll display their image. So we're going to go back to our container, and we're going to go ahead and insert a gallery. And it's going to be a blank horizontal gallery. I'm going to leave the items blank for now. I'm just going to change some of these other settings here. So the width is going to be parent.width. Height will be parent.height. The template size, I'm going to change to 35. Template padding will be 0. Show scroll bar will be off. And now we can actually work out some of the items. So we're going to go to data source or the items here. So we're going to do a for all. Because this is a multiple selection column for the people, we have to loop this logic through a for all formula. And we're going to do first n. So you can set this to whatever you like, but basically if it's more than 2 people, I only want to grab the first 2 people that it's assigned to, and then anyone else I'm going to do a count to display how many more people are assigned as a number. So first n, and I'm going to do this item dot assigned to, and I'm going to take only the first 2 records, and I'm going to call it as assigned to. And we're going to do a record here, and we're going to say email is going to be assigned to dot email, and we're going to do display name equals assigned to dot display name, and user photo, I'm going to say if is not blank, assigned to dot email, and Office 365 users dot user photo metadata, and we're going to say assigned to dot email, and has photo. Then I want to retrieve the Office 365 user photo v2, and it's going to be assigned to .email. Otherwise, I want it to be blank. Right, so basically if the user has a photo, I want the photo, otherwise give me a blank outcome. And then the other column that I want to create is user initials. So this is going to be a concatenate function, concatenate. And we're going to have to do this in a bit of a trickier way. We're going to do a left. So we're going to take the left of Office 365 users dot user profile v2, and we're going to say assigned to .email given name. So that's the first name of the user. And I want the left one. So we're going to take only the first letter of the given name. And I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to copy this. So comma, I'll paste this as well, but instead of given name, I'm going to say the surname. And I want to also take the first letter of that and then close off the concatenate function and then close off the record function. And then finally close off the for all function. So I've basically created, for each person that's assigned to a particular record, I've created a new table that takes their email, their display name, this user photo logic, and their user initials, and creates it into a record. So that's the data that we're going to be using to build our gallery. So now we can actually go ahead and build our gallery and the images. So I'm going to hit that, so our gallery. This gallery, it's not letting me hit the edit button. So for some reason, this button is sort of in the way. For now, I'm just going to temporarily make this minus self.x minus, let's say 100 or maybe 200. So it'll give me access to this. So now I can hit that edit button and I can go ahead and insert an image. And this image is going to be not the sample image, but it's going to be this item dot user photo. So that's the custom data source that we just brought in. I want the width to be 30, height to be 30. I want the X to be at the center of our template of the gallery. So I'm going to say parent dot template width minus self dot width divided by 2. That's going to center it within our template. I'm going to copy this, and for the Y property, I'm going to paste it in, but instead of template width and self dot width, I'm going to replace both using height. And there you go. So it's now fully centered. So that's exactly how we want it. That's fine. I'm not going to have a border, but I am going to have a border radius. So the border radius, I want it to be half of our width or half of our height to make a perfect circle. So I'm just going to set it to 15. And that's great. So now we have our users. What I wanted to do, if there's users that are more than 2, I want there to be another circle in here that has a +1 or a +2. It's going to show how many people are truly part of this project. And so we're going to have to go to this container right here, and I'm going to insert a button, and that's going to act as our little circle that we're going to throw some text over. I'm going to combine some text and variables. So I'm going to use something called string interpolation, where basically you put a $, you put a double quote, and then you can now type everything. So the plus sign is what we don't want to display. And I want to, within a squiggly bracket, I want to do a formula. I'm going to do a count rows of this item assigned to minus 2, because we have X amount of people that are assigned. I'm going to close the squiggly bracket and finally the single bracket. Because yeah, we want to count how many people are assigned. I'm minusing 2 because we're already displaying 2. So it's going to show us how many additional people there are. We don't have to do too many calculations. If there's only one, it's going to be -1. So we're not going to worry too much about that because we're going to hide anything that's not 0. So I'm going to say if count rows of this item dot assigned to is greater than 2, that's what I'm going to be, that's when this will be visible. If it's less than 2, then I'm going to hide it because we know it's already going to be displayed as the image. So that's great. We now have these showing for the people that are overflowing or that are above 2. So that's exactly what we want. We just now want to style this. So the styling of this, I'm going to set the X to, maybe let's set it to the 80th position because these are 30 and yeah, 80 will be good. The Y property, I'm also going to set it to the center. So it's going to be parent.height minus self.height divided by 2. The width, I'm going to set to 35 or 30 to match our circle pictures. Height will also be 30. I'm going to set the border radius to 15. So it makes it into a perfect circle. Border, I'm going to turn off. And the font, I'll keep it at that, but I'm going to change it to 10. So it's going to be a lot smaller. And I'm going to also set some padding. So the top I'm going to reduce by 2 and the left I'm going to reduce so that it sits more in the center. So that's looking pretty good. And maybe we can do semi-bold is good. Yeah, I think that's looking quite nicely. I do want to change the colors. So the font color will be my theme dot gray, and maybe the fill color will be my theme dot light gray. But actually that's a little too light of a light gray. So maybe we can actually change this. Let's just manually set this to this color here. So 232, 232, 232, and a 1. So it's like a bit of a darker gray. Don't worry about any hover effects. Those won't be accessible because remember we have the invisible button over top. So yeah, we won't have to worry about any of that. And actually the images are a bit close to the edge here. So maybe I'll change the X property. Instead of having it manual, I'll set it back. I'll do a 10. Yeah, I'll manually set it to 10 so that it gives some padding over here to match all of our text. And that's gonna align things quite well. Now we also want to add for users that don't have a photo. So right now a lot of these people have photos, but I think this one actually has someone that does not have a photo. So I'm gonna take this same button that we did because I'm gonna use a similar style. I'm gonna copy it, and within our gallery I'm going to paste it in, and it's gonna give us some errors, but that's okay. We're gonna fix some of those. I'm just gonna update the X property to 10 so it matches up with our photos. And let's see what the errors are. So the text, of course, we don't need this. We actually want this item dot user initials. So this is what we've already created through our data. I'm just gonna get rid of some errors here. Visible, I'm gonna set it to visible only if is blank, and this item dot user photo. So if this user photo does not have a photo, it's going to be invisible, but you see here, it popped up SR. So I also want to change the colors. I don't want it to be this gray. Maybe we can do the fill property. We can set my theme dot primary, or maybe light purple. I think I had it. Yeah, light purple sounds good. And the primary text, maybe that can be the primary text. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. So now anyone that doesn't have a photo will have their initials. And that's perfect. We'll make sure to select our button again and make sure to remove this minus 200 because we want the parent to be stretching. We want this invisible button to stretch out all the way to the end. So now we can click anywhere and it'll show all of our records. Now it wouldn't be a grid view if it couldn't sort. Like if I wanted to sort by title, start, due date, project. I would want my users to be able to click and sort of sort from ascending or descending order based on whatever their table is. So we can do this using some logic and some buttons. So I'll show you how exactly to do this. So I'm going to select the container that has all of our labels for our titles of each column. And I'm going to insert an icon, and it's going to be, it doesn't really matter. I'll just do arrow or sort. Yeah, I'll use the sort icon. And I'll just throw it in there. I'm going to customize it a little bit. I'm going to set its height to stretch with a minimum height of 0. I'll make my width to 40. And I'm going to set some padding, maybe from the top and bottom. If we do 10 and 10, it's just going to shrink our icon a little bit. That's going to be much better. And everything else, yeah, that should be good. Maybe we can do it a little bit smaller actually. Let's do 15, 15. Yeah, that'll be better. And I'm just gonna move it so it's next to the title, right there, just after the title. And let's set some functionality. So I'm gonna create some variables. I'm going to set var sort column. So this is gonna be the identifier of which column that I wanna sort by. I'm gonna manually type it in as title. And I also want to do another variable. I'm going to set var sort descending to if statement. So if var sort column equals title, then I want the opposite of var sort descending. Otherwise, I want it false. And then close the bracket. So if we're currently sorting by the title column, I want it to change our descending order. So I want it to be ascending or descending. Otherwise, I want it to be false. So false is going to actually reset our sort variable, and it's going to change our icons. We're going to use this to change how the icons look based on the selection. So in order to do this, we're going to go to the icon, and on the icon, we're going to create some logic here. So by default right now is just the sort icon, but we're going to delete this for now, and we're going to do a switch function. And I'm going to say true. So anything that's true will give us an output. So if var sort column equals title, and it's not var sort descending, then I want icon dot arrow up. If var sort column equals title and var sort descending, then I want icon dot arrow down. Otherwise, I want icon dot sort, and then close the bracket. So you'll see now if we hit the play button, I haven't made it functional to actually sort the gallery, but just for the icon perspective, if we click it, it's gonna go descending. If I click it again, it's gonna be ascending, and so on. This cycle will continue forever. Now, when we add other icons like for start, do, and project, and all of these other things, if we click on it, this will reset to the sort arrow. So it'll have an up and down arrow to show that we're not actually currently sorting through that title column. But before we get there, let's go ahead and apply a filter here. So in our gallery, in our data source, our items property, we just have a filter property. On a new line here, I'm going to say sort by columns. I'm just going to tab this one ahead, and I'm going to say var sort column. So this is going to be our variable, and I'm going to have an if statement here. So if var sort descending is basically true, then I want the sort order dot descending. Otherwise, I want sort order dot ascending. Close the bracket and close that bracket as well. And now if we click, you'll see descending W, T, all the way to like C. And then if we click it again, it'll change that order. Now, if we want to align, so this is great. We'll do this for all the rest of them. But if we want to align it so it's all perfectly aligned with this, we're going to have to put this and this into a container. So I'm going to do Command X or Control X, and I'm going to select this container and I'm going to insert another container when it'll be a horizontal container. And I'm going to set its properties. The minimum height will be 0. Flexible width will be on, minimum width will be 200. It'll be 2 parts of our area. The border radius will be 0, drop shadow will be none. And I'm going to paste the title and our sort. The minimum width will be 0 for the actual title. The width will be 40, so that's going to be fixed. That's perfect. And because this container's minimum width is 200, it'll still apply nicely. So we're going to shift this over to the beginning there to our title. So now that's looking pretty good and it's perfectly aligned. So we're going to have to do a similar thing for all of them. And we can go ahead and do that. So I'm basically going to copy this container that contains the title and the sort. I'm going to Command C, go up to our main container here, and I'm just going to paste this in. Let's delete the start date, and that's the one we're going to replace. We're going to move this container to where that will be. This one, the minimum width will be 120, and the fill portions will be 1, and that's going to bring it in to that proper size. The title we're going to change. It's going to be start. Then the icons, we can change the on select property. I'm just going to change these titles to start date, and the icon code, instead of title, I'm going to say start date. And so now when we hold our option key, you'll see it sorts it descending order. It'll sort it ascending. And if we click one of the title, you'll see it goes back to the sort icon, indicating that we're no longer sorting with the start date. We're now sorting with using the title. So that's perfect. What we can do now, it'll be a little bit easier because all the settings are set for this one. We're going to copy. I'm going to delete the due date, and I'm going to paste our start container, and I'm going to move it to where the due date should be. And I'm just going to change this text to due. And then instead of start date, I'm going to say due date. And I'm going to update the icon properties. Instead of start date, again, due date. And these names have to be the name of your SharePoint column without a space. That's how the sort by columns piece works. And we can just test this out. Due date. There we go. Now we're going to do the same for project, status, and priority, but the sorting is going to be a little bit different for those because the project is a lookup column to our project list, and the status and priority, they're not a simple text field, so it's not going to work for sorting. We're going to have to do some adjustments in order to be able to sort by choice columns. So before we get there, maybe let's set up our titles here. I'm going to take the title column and copy that. I'm going to delete the project, and I'm going to paste our column container, move it in the place where project should have been, change the title, project. I'm going to change the icon. Instead of title, will be maybe let's say project title. Now, although this column doesn't exist yet, we're going to add a column to our gallery in order for it to filter properly. But I'll walk you through that in a little bit here. And then the on select property, we're going to change this again, the titles to project title. So if we click on this, it's not going to work. It's going to give us an error. The project title does not exist as a sort column type. So I'm just going to go back and sort by one of these other ones to get rid of that error. But what we're going to do is select our gallery, and we're going to have to add some columns. So the sort by is perfect, but we're going to underneath add columns. And I'm just going to tab this ahead one space, and we're going to add columns. I'm going to call this project title, and it's going to be a lookup of our projects list where ID equals project ID, which is from our task list. And I want to take out the title column. And then I'm going to close the bracket and then add a comma. And so now this project title column now all of a sudden exists. So if we go back here, now this will work. Now we're able to have the sort descending and sorting ascending of a related table. And we're going to have to do something similar for status and priority. So maybe before we do the titles, let's go ahead and update this. For status, let's call it status value, because we need to extract the value from the choice column. And this is going to be status.value. And for priority, value will be priority.value. There we go. So now those exist, and we can go ahead and update these title columns, and we can use the start container here. I'm just going to delete status, delete priority, and I'm going to paste, and one more time, and I'm going to move these over. Maybe it'll be easier just to move the assigned to. I'll move that to the end, and now I have these here. So the start I'm going to change to status, and this start I'm going to change to priority. And we just have to update the onSelect properties here. So instead of start date, we're going to say status value. So that was the manual column that we had to add in order to extract the value from the choice column. And we're also going to update the icon. So instead of start date, will be status value. And so now you can preview and see it's gonna be able to work and work through the sort. And let's do priority as well. So priority, we're gonna update the onSelect, priority value, and the icon as well. Priority value. And there we go. So it all works. I'm not going to do a sort on the assigned by, because it's not going to make sense for a multiple person column, but I'll leave it for all of these, and it's fully responsive, as you can see. Now, one thing that you'll notice if we preview our app and we click on an item now, you'll see there's an error, and var task is no longer valid. The reason for this is because if we go back to the table here, we added these columns that no longer exist, right? When it tries to match up this task, it's no longer going to match up. So what we need to do, instead of having our invisible buttons onSelect property add var task as this item, we now have to do a lookup column. So it'll be lookup tasks where ID equals this item.id and bracket. So now when we add a value, it's gonna match up to all the records. There's no custom rows there for it to get confused about, and it'll work perfectly fine. hope you like this video and are enjoying the series for a project management app. I really think with the feedback I've been getting from all of you, we're going to make this into something truly special that we can be proud of. There's going to be lots of functionality in this app, and hopefully we all learn something along the way. So let me know in the comments where you think we should take this app next. I appreciate all the engagement and support for all the videos that I've been putting out. I hope to make 2025 really special, so let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.